All right, today we're diving into a really provocative piece, Stefan Molyneux's Against the Gods. This isn't just another essay about belief. No, it's something that tries to tear down the very language we use to talk about it. So let's jump right in.
So the essay kicks off with this really vivid, kind of strange story. Picture this, a man out in the woods hunting for dragons. But here's the kicker. He straight up admits that dragons don't exist. Yeah, you heard that right. He's hunting for something he knows isn't real.
Now, this isn't just some weird little story to grab your attention. The author uses this dragon hunter as a direct analogy for atheism. I mean, think about it. His whole point is, how can it be logical to build your entire identity around being against something that you're certain doesn't even exist in the first place?
And that whole dragon hunter thing, it brings us right to the first big idea of this piece, this concept of hunting for things that don't exist. The author is basically trying to blow up the whole debate and start over, right from square one, starting with the words we use.
So where does he say the problem starts? Well, according to him, it all comes down to the definition of atheism itself. He's arguing that the standard, dictionary definition is broken from the get-go. It sets the whole conversation on the wrong path.
And just look at the difference here. The author's point is that the standard definition sounds super defensive, right? It uses words like disbelief or denial, but his version, it's totally different. He just throws gods into the same bucket as every other imaginary thing you can think of. Santa, the Easter Bunny, you name it. For him, it's not about being against this one specific thing. It's about having a consistent stance on things that just don't exist.
Okay, so this leads to a really key philosophical point he's making. He's saying, look, there has to be one single universal rule for deciding if something is real or not. And that rule, he says, has to apply to everything equally, whether we're talking about rocks, ghosts, or gods. You can't just invent a special set of rules for this one particular thing.
And here's where it really clicks into place. By focusing only on gods, the author argues you've stopped using a universal principle. What you have now, in his view, is just a prejudice. It'd be like a mathematician running around saying they're anti 2 + 2 = 5. I mean, why would you? You're just pro-math. It's the same idea. But he doesn't stop there. He actually takes this whole idea one giant step further. He argues that gods aren't just like Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. Nope. This is where he rolls out his square circle argument, and his claim is that gods belong in a totally unique category of impossible.
So the essay makes this really sharp distinction. On one side, you've got things like unicorns. I mean, they're basically just horses with a horn, right? We haven't found one, but the idea isn't a contradiction. They're logically possible. But on the other side, you have something like a square circle. That's not just unproven, it's impossible by its very definition. The words themselves contradict each other.
And this is the absolute core of his whole argument. He says that gods don't belong in the unicorn category of unproven. No way. He puts them squarely, pun intended, in the logically impossible category, right alongside square circles. Why? Because he argues their very definitions are just full of contradictions.
And he gives a few examples of what he means by these contradictions. Like, think about this. How can a being know everything that's going to happen, but also have the power to change what's going to happen? The two ideas seem to cancel each other out. Or another one. How can you have a thinking, conscious mind without a physical brain or any matter to support it?
Okay, so with all this talk about logical contradictions, you'd think his main target would be people who believe in God, right? But here's the twist. His primary target isn't theism at all, it's agnosticism. He claims agnosticism completely fails to follow its own rules of logic when it gets to the topic of gods.
So he starts with a really common agnostic argument, one you've probably heard before. It's the idea that, hey, maybe gods exist in another dimension, right? Some dimension X that's just totally beyond our ability to see or measure.
But he immediately pounces on what he sees as a paradox here. If you say nobody can be certain about anything, well, aren't you being pretty certain about that? It's a statement of absolute certainty that says absolute certainty is impossible. See the contradiction?
And that leads him to ask this really sharp question. Is this whole maybe in another dimension idea a consistent principle you apply to everything? Or is it a special little prejudice that you only pull out for this one specific topic?
And this is where he really drives the point home. He argues that agnostics just don't use this Dimension X logic anywhere else in their lives. I mean, you'd never see it in a courtroom, right? Your Honor, my client might be innocent in another dimension. Or in a hospital,
let's try this bogus cure. It might work in an alternate reality. He says this special pleading is a get-out-of-jail-free card that's only ever used for gods.
And he has this fantastic analogy for it. He says, arguing for a reality where our logic is different, while using our logic to make that argument, is like mailing someone a letter to prove that mail never gets delivered. The very act of doing it proves it's wrong. It's self-defeating.
So after he thinks he's dismantled the logic, the author makes his final move. And it's definitely his most provocative one. He switches gears from philosophy to psychology, and he starts asking, okay, why? Why would anyone hold on to a position that he sees as so logically broken?
And his answer is pretty blunt. He claims this whole special exception for gods, this one area where we just can't know for sure, isn't really a philosophical stance. Not at all. He says it's a social strategy.
Here's his reasoning. He argues that if you tell someone religious there is no God, they don't just hear a philosophical disagreement. They often hear it as a personal attack on their family, their entire upbringing, their community. And that, of course, can lead to some serious conflict and getting cut off. But the agnostic position, it lets you sidestep all that drama with a simple, well, who can say for sure?
And this brings us to his final and probably his sharpest point. It's all about his definition of cowardice. For him, the issue isn't that people are afraid of the social fallout. That's just human nature. The real problem, he claims, is avoiding being honest with yourself about why you're giving this one single topic a special, illogical pass.
So if we boil his entire argument down, here's what we get. In his view, agnosticism isn't some humble, intellectually honest position of, I don't know, not even close. He defines it as an intellectually dishonest fog, a convenient smokescreen people use to avoid uncomfortable conversations and social conflict.
And that really leaves us with one big question to chew on, doesn't it? The author's whole case started with the definition of atheism and ended by questioning the motives behind agnosticism. It really makes you wonder, how much does the language we inherit, the very words we use, actually shape the boundaries of what we're even allowed to think or argue about?